I am Mr. Kale, have you noticed? Something changed. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Not in a way that made headlines. There was no public statement. No trending hashtag. No official movement. But if you've been paying attention, you've probably noticed it. More men are stepping back. Not in anger. Not in defeat. Not in bitterness. Just quietly. You see it in small ways. Fewer arguments. Less chasing. Less explaining. Less reacting. The same men who once overinvested emotionally are now calmer. More reserved. More focused. They still date. They still interact. They still live their lives. But the energy is different. There's less urgency. Less need to impress. Less desire to compete. And the interesting part? Most of them didn't even announce this change. They didn't tell the world they were shifting. They didn't gather to plan it. It happened individually. Quietly. Internally. One man at a time. At first, it looked like disinterest. Maybe even withdrawal. But if you look closer, it's something else. It's an upgrade. A silent one. And in this video, we're going to break down what this silent upgrade really is, why it's happening, what triggered it, and what it changes in modern relationships. Because whether people admit it or not, this shift is real. Before we go further, we need to be clear about one thing. The silent upgrade is not revenge. It's not a strategy built on anger. It's not about proving a point. And it's definitely not about hating anyone. It's something much quieter than that. The silent upgrade is when a man slowly shifts his focus away from seeking approval, and toward building control over his own life. He stops asking, "How do I impress?" and starts asking, "How do I improve?" He stops reacting emotionally to every situation. And starts observing more than speaking. He stops chasing attention. And starts investing energy where it gives real returns. This shift doesn't require an announcement. It doesn't require dramatic lifestyle changes overnight. It often begins after exhaustion. After overgiving. After over-explaining. After realizing that constant emotional effort does not always lead to respect. Instead of arguing louder, he becomes quieter. Instead of proving harder, he becomes sharper. Instead of demanding attention, he becomes selective with it. And here's what makes it powerful. It's internal first. The silent upgrade is not about changing others. It's about recalibrating yourself. Your standards. Your reactions. Your emotional availability. Your priorities. From the outside, it may look like distance. But from the inside, it feels like clarity. It feels like regaining control. And once that internal shift happens, behavior naturally changes. Not aggressively. Just steadily. Before the silent upgrade, there was something else. A louder strategy. A more visible effort. For years, many men were taught that success in relationships required constant performance. Be confident. Be funny. Be successful. Be emotionally available. Be ambitious. Be impressive. Always bring value. Always prove yourself. It became a competition. Compete for attention. Compete for approval. Compete with invisible options. And for a while, many men played that game seriously. They over-communicated. Over-explained. Over-invested early. Over-gave emotionally. They tried to show effort. They tried to show consistency. They tried to show commitment quickly. But something strange happened. The more they tried to prove their value, the less secure they felt. Because when you are constantly performing, you are constantly being evaluated. Every text. Every response time. Every plan. Every emotional reaction. It started to feel like an audition that never ended. And auditions are exhausting. At some point, many men realized something uncomfortable. Loud effort does not always create respect. Constant availability does not always create attraction. Over-explaining does not always create understanding. In fact, sometimes it creates the opposite. The louder the effort, the more replaceable it felt. The harder they tried, the more drained they became. And that's where the shift begins. Not in anger. In fatigue. When loud strategies stop producing results, people don't usually scream louder. They go quiet. And that quiet is where the silent upgrade starts forming. The silent upgrade doesn't begin with motivation. It begins with a breaking point. For many men, it wasn't one dramatic event. It wasn't one betrayal or one explosive argument. It was a slow build-up of small realizations. Moments where effort felt unnoticed. Moments where loyalty felt taken for granted. Moments where emotional investment didn't feel returned. At first, they ignored it. They told themselves to try harder. Communicate better. Be more patient. Be more understanding. But over time, something started to feel off. The energy was uneven. The effort felt one-sided. The reward didn't match the cost. And when that pattern repeats long enough, a quiet question appears. Why am I working this hard? That question is powerful. Because once you start asking it honestly, you start evaluating everything differently. The breaking point is not loud. It's not dramatic. It's subtle. It's when a man realizes that constantly proving himself is draining his peace. It's when he notices that chasing validation feels heavier than building himself. It's when he understands that reacting emotionally gives away more power than it creates. And in that moment, something shifts internally. Not outwardly. Internally. The desire to argue decreases. The need to impress fades. The urgency to compete disappears. And instead of escalating effort, he redirects it. That is the true beginning of the silent upgrade. The first real change in the silent upgrade is not emotional. It's practical. Instead of pouring energy into chasing attention, proving worth, or managing relationship tension, that energy gets redirected. Quietly. Without announcement. The time once spent overthinking messages is now spent building skills. The emotional energy once used to explain feelings repeatedly is now used to strengthen discipline. The mental space once consumed by validation is now invested in self-development. Gym. Business. Learning. Networking. Financial stability. Not as a performance. Not to show off. But as a reallocation of focus. Energy is limited. And when a man realizes he has been investing too much of it externally, he begins to pull it back internally. This is not withdrawal from life. It's prioritization. Instead of asking, how do I keep this person interested? He starts asking, how do I increase my own value regardless? The attention shifts from reaction to creation. From chasing to building. From emotional volatility to structured progress. And here's what makes this step powerful. It creates visible change without saying a word. Because when someone becomes more focused, more grounded, and less reactive, people notice. Not because he told them. But because his behavior speaks differently. The silent upgrade begins with energy redirection. And once that shift happens, the rest follows naturally. After energy is redirected, something else begins to change. Emotional reactions start to decrease. Not because feelings disappear. But because control increases. The man who once reacted immediately now pauses. The man who once over-explained now speaks less. The man who once argued to be understood now observes more than he responds. This is not coldness. It's regulation. He understands that reacting quickly often gives away leverage. That emotional overexposure can reduce perceived strength. That not every comment deserves a response. So instead of escalating tension, he maintains calm. Instead of defending himself constantly, he lets behavior speak. Instead of trying to win every disagreement, he chooses which situations are worth engagement. This emotional detachment is not about shutting down. It's about reducing unnecessary emotional investment. Because one of the biggest drains in modern relationships is overreacting to every small shift in attention, tone, or mood. When a man detaches emotionally in a healthy way, he becomes less predictable. Less desperate for reassurance. Less dependent on immediate validation. Less shaken by minor disruptions. And that calm presence changes dynamics. Not loudly, but noticeably. People tend to respect what they cannot easily control. And emotional stability is difficult to control. The silent upgrade continues when a man realizes that emotional calm is more powerful than emotional intensity. Once energy is redirected and emotional reactions are controlled, the next shift becomes clear. Not everyone gets access anymore. Before the silent upgrade, many men operated with open access. They gave time quickly. They gave attention freely. They responded fast. They explained deeply. They invested early. Now, that changes. Attention becomes selective. Time becomes intentional. Effort becomes earned. This is not about playing games. It's about recognizing value. When someone invests in everything, their investment loses weight. But when someone becomes selective, their attention gains importance. The silent upgrade teaches one simple principle: not every connection deserves full effort. Some people are curious. Some are temporary. Some are testing boundaries. And some are genuinely aligned. Learning the difference is power. Instead of overcommitting early, he observes patterns. Instead of chasing mixed signals, he steps back. Instead of trying to convince someone to see his value, he lets consistency reveal theirs. Selective investment also means walking away faster. Not dramatically. Not angrily. But decisively. Because once a man understands his own worth, he no longer negotiates for basic respect. And here's where the shift becomes noticeable. Scarcity increases perceived value. When attention is no longer unlimited, it becomes meaningful. The silent upgrade reaches maturity when effort becomes intentional instead of automatic. When a man goes through the silent upgrade, the most interesting part is not what he feels. It's what others start noticing. The energy shifts. He is still present. Still calm. Still respectful. But less available. Less reactive. Less predictable. And human psychology responds to that. People naturally value what feels scarce. They pay more attention to what feels stable. They respect what doesn't beg for approval. When someone stops chasing, the dynamic changes. Curiosity increases. Why is he different now? Why isn't he reacting like before? Why does he seem so calm? Mystery replaces predictability. And predictability, when it comes with overinvestment, often reduces attraction. But calm unpredictability? That creates intrigue. Another psychological shift happens as well. When a man becomes emotionally steady and selective, he sends a subtle signal. I'm not operating from fear. And that signal changes perception. Because confidence is not loud. It's controlled. This is not manipulation. It's behavioral recalibration. When someone upgrades internally, the external dynamic adjusts automatically. Not because he forced it. But because behavior always influences response. The silent upgrade works quietly. But its psychological impact is visible. At first glance, someone might say, this is just another dating tactic. But it's not. Because tactics are temporary. The silent upgrade is internal. In the past, some men tried strategies to create reactions. They delayed replies on purpose. They acted distant to trigger interest. They followed rules like a checklist. But that kind of behavior requires constant effort. It feels forced. The silent upgrade is different because it's not about controlling someone else's reaction. It's about stabilizing your own behavior. There's no performance behind it. No pretending not to care. No artificial mystery. No calculated coldness. It's simply a shift in priorities. When a man genuinely becomes more focused on growth, his availability naturally decreases. When he becomes emotionally regulated, his reactions naturally soften. When he raises his standards, his investment naturally becomes selective. There is no act. Just alignment. That's why it feels different this time. Because it's not built on ego. It's built on clarity. And clarity is sustainable. You don't have to maintain it. You don't have to fake it. You don't have to monitor every move. It becomes your default. And that authenticity is what makes the silent upgrade powerful. Like any shift in behavior, the silent upgrade can be misunderstood. There's a difference between calm detachment and emotional shutdown. If taken too far, emotional regulation can slowly turn into emotional unavailability. Instead of being stable, a man can become cold. Instead of being selective, he can become isolated. Instead of protecting peace, he can start avoiding vulnerability completely. That's not growth. That's protection disguised as strength. The silent upgrade is not about building walls. It's about building standards. It's not about avoiding connection. It's about improving the quality of connection. Some men, after being hurt or drained, may confuse detachment with superiority. They may stop communicating deeply. They may assume they no longer need emotional openness. They may treat every interaction like a test. That path leads to loneliness. Because real strength still allows intimacy. Real confidence still allows honesty. The goal is not to feel nothing. The goal is to react less and choose better. The silent upgrade works only when balance is maintained. Calm, not cold. Selective, not isolated. Stable, not emotionally unavailable. When done correctly, it creates clarity. When misused, it creates distance. And the difference matters. When the silent upgrade is done correctly, the results are not dramatic. They are steady. Over time, a man becomes less reactive and more intentional. His identity stops depending on how others respond to him. He feels grounded, even when situations change. That internal stability becomes the biggest shift. Relationships also begin to feel different. He attracts differently. He filters faster. He tolerates less confusion. He walks away sooner when respect is missing. Not because he is bitter. Because he is clear. One of the biggest long-term outcomes is peace. Not loneliness. Peace. The need to constantly prove, chase, and explain slowly disappears. Emotional energy is no longer scattered across every interaction. It becomes focused and controlled. Another long-term result is leverage. When someone is not desperate for attention, they become more valuable. When someone is emotionally steady, they become harder to manipulate. When someone has built a strong personal foundation, they no longer depend on unstable dynamics. Over time, the silent upgrade creates something rare. Self-trust. And once a man trusts his own judgment, his decisions become sharper. He doesn't rush into connections. He doesn't overinvest too early. He doesn't panic when someone pulls away. He evaluates calmly. And that calm evaluation changes everything. The silent upgrade is not happening in isolation. It's not just one or two men changing their behavior. It's a pattern. Modern dating has changed. Social dynamics have changed. Attention has become easier to access, but harder to secure. Validation is everywhere, but stability feels rare. In this environment, constant performance becomes exhausting. There are more options. More comparisons. More expectations. More noise. And when expectations rise while emotional security decreases, people adapt. Many men are realizing that chasing louder does not solve the problem. Arguing harder does not fix misalignment. Overgiving does not guarantee loyalty. So instead of competing in a crowded emotional marketplace, they step back and improve their position. It's not rebellion. It's recalibration. They are choosing peace over pressure. Focus over friction. Control over chaos. The silent upgrade becomes attractive because it feels sustainable. It doesn't require constant emotional strain. It doesn't depend on external approval. It doesn't rely on temporary tactics. It creates internal stability in an unstable environment. And when enough individuals make that shift quietly, it starts to look like a movement, even if no one officially called it one. From the outside, the silent upgrade can look like withdrawal. Less talking. Less chasing. Less emotional intensity. But there is a big difference between stepping back out of fear, and stepping back out of clarity. Withdrawal is usually driven by pain. A man feels rejected, hurt, or defeated, so he shuts down. He avoids connection. He stops trying completely. He becomes passive. Upgrade is different. Upgrade is active. It's intentional. Instead of shutting down, he builds up. Instead of avoiding growth, he invests in it. Instead of isolating himself, he improves himself. Withdrawal says, I'm done because I'm hurt. Upgrade says, I'm adjusting because I've learned. Withdrawal creates distance without direction. Upgrade creates space with purpose. One leads to resentment. The other leads to strength. This distinction matters. Because if someone mistakes fear for strategy, they can end up lonely instead of empowered. The silent upgrade is not about disappearing from life. It's about raising standards within it. And when done correctly, it does not reduce connection. It improves the quality of it. The loudest shift is not always the strongest one. Sometimes the most powerful changes happen quietly. No announcement. No warning. No debate. Just internal clarity. The silent upgrade is not about dominating anyone. It's not about proving superiority. And it's not about rejecting connection. It's about repositioning yourself. When a man stops chasing validation and starts building stability, his presence changes. When he stops reacting emotionally and starts responding intentionally, his value changes. When he stops investing blindly and starts choosing carefully, his outcomes change. Quietly. Strength does not always look aggressive. Sometimes it looks calm. Sometimes it looks selective. Sometimes it looks like silence. And that silence is not weakness. It's awareness. It's discipline. It's self-control. The real question is not whether this shift is happening. It is. The real question is whether it's coming from fear, or from growth. Because one creates isolation. The other creates power. Have you noticed this shift in yourself, or in someone around you? This is Mr. Kale. And sometimes, the most important upgrades are the ones nobody hears.